Next up, we're joined by genealogy educators and enthusiasts, Maureen Hanlon. As a long-standing member of the California Genealogical Society, Maureen has been researching Irish, German, New England, and San Francisco ancestry since 2002. She's completed prestige courses and contributed a scholarly article to the California Nuggets. Today, she's with us and guide us in tracking Irish lineage, constructing life events timeline, as well as tracking common barriers in research. Let's all welcome Maureen Hanlon. Thank you.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you for welcoming me, and I'll be talking about Irish ancestors. And in 2021, a survey was done that showed that over 31 million people, about 9.5% of the population, have ancestors from Ireland, making it one of the second largest groups of ethnic ancestors. So if you have ancestors from Ireland, you've got lots of company, and you can share your problems with each other in trying to find them. So this presentation is for beginners. I'm going to go through a 4-step process of helping you to get started finding them in Ireland, but it's going to start, as I'll show you, with U.S. records. And to start off, I'm going to tell you about my successes here at the San Francisco Library. There's the San Francisco History Room, which has a names index, and I was able to find the name of my great-grandfather, who was born in County Kerry in 1828, referenced in a book about a Masonic lodge that was founded out in the Outer Mission District where he lived. I had no idea he was a Mason. In fact, as a Catholic, I didn't think Masons were allowed to be Catholic and vice versa. But there he is. And not only was it a biography about him in this book, I put the call number up in case you have a Mason and lurking in the closet, and there's a sample of his handwriting. He was the secretary of one of the first secretaries of this Masonic lodge, which still exists today, by the way, the Mission Lodge. So the library is just a wonderful place, and though I will be talking about a lot of online sources, as we say at CGS, California Genealogy Society, it's the tip of the iceberg. And you want to make sure you get out of your pajamas and go to a library and courthouse some days and look in person. The other thing I found here, referencing the speaker just before you, was a newspaper article that had his picture, an actual drawing. This was in 1890, where did I put the date? 1894, I believe, when he was president of the St. Patrick's Day Parade. This was a huge event in San Francisco where there were over 100 organizations that marched, and he had to wrangle them all. And this little drawing of him appeared in a supplement to the Daily Call. Now, the Daily Call is an early San Francisco newspaper that is online, but several editions and years are not online. And it was only here at the library, by browsing through the supplement to the published newspaper, did I find what's priceless to me, something about what he looked like, which is no photograph survives. So this is Daniel, kind of a cute guy too, I have to say. So this is what I'm going to go through today. We'll take a drive through this 4-step process, as I mentioned. First, you want to find as many dates and places as you can in U.S. records. And U.S. records are going to have a lot more than you'll be able to find in Ireland, where records are very limited for lots of reasons. I'll cover a few. So if you start with U.S. records, you're going to have better luck. Date of birth, date of death, where they originated from, who their spouses, who their parents were, are all possible to find in U.S. records. Then we're going to look at we're going to create a map of that ancestor's life and compare it to the available Irish records. Because no use going to look at an archive that your ancestor may have already left and emigrated. And then we're going to give you some search tips for those sources in Ireland And then finally, do a double back process of checking other related families, friends, associates, and neighbors, because if you've struck out, you may find them with this strategy of circling back. It's not an easy road to take. You can see here the little car has got lots of offshoots and ramps that they're going to get stuck on and have to get back to the road to travel on. I would say don't give up, but also don't expect this to be something you can do in 2 weeks. That's if you extraordinarily have the luck of the Irish, if that happens. It may though. I'm not going to say it won't. You're going to explore lots of different records, and in the U.S., there's lots of places to look. As I said, online is only the tip of the iceberg. There'll be historical societies, there'll be cemeteries, there will be other libraries, many places to go, and many online as well. More and more, as you know, are getting digitized. So this little diagram, which is in handouts I gave to Richard, and you can get, is sort of a diagram to lead you through all those different types of records, one after the other, and hopefully one of them will be the sweet spot where you'll find a name or a place. So this is something you can get a digital copy of or a hard copy of after the presentation. Here's a story of success from using U.S. records, because you're going to start at home. You're going to start with that oldest relative that you have still living and talk to them. You're going to ask about stories. You're going to go through attics and basements and everything in between. Look at trophies, look at yearbooks, look at baby books. And in this case, my friend was going to Ireland and wanted to know where her husband's grandfather had come from. And all they knew about him was the county and that he'd been in the Olympics. Well, we could search and we could find a biography of Olympic participants and people who had won medals. And there, Bill Carr shows up. And what's most interesting about this is it gives his place of birth. I might be butchering the pronunciation, Gortnagras in Donegal. And then a little bio that gives his parents' names and when he immigrated to the U.S. So really, bonanza. And what's even more interesting is that in Donegal, the name Carr has another variant that's used more often, Mackle Carr. So you might not be able to see it, but it says the father's name was Robert Edmund Mcilcar. So nothing like Carr if you start searching with a C, but you'd have to search him with an MC. So that's why you want to find these little variants and look at all the places you can. I have more stories about a woman who went through the piano bench, you know, where we all have that lidded piano bench, or Grandma did, and there she found records from Belfast about her great-grandfather. And Kathleen found her grandmother's birthplace in her husband's baby book. So don't ignore the sources at home. And then the next biggest source of information, or where you're likely to hit gold, are records from around the time of death. Here we've got examples of tombstones, headstones, where the place of birth is inscribed on the tombstone. And in one case, it even goes down to the civil parish level, which is a great help, rather than the county, which is the largest division of land in Ireland. And if you can find that, you've got gold. And also around the time of death, you can see these funeral records from funeral homes. There we'll have filled out, like the death certificate that the previous speaker showed you, they often have the name of the parents, they have the origin in Ireland, and in this case, the San Francisco homes would clip out the obituary from the newspaper and stick it into the record. So you've got the survivors, you've got the spouse. If it's a woman and her brothers are in there, you've got her maiden name, and more. Wonderful collection of these at sfgenealogy.org, also on Family Search, covering San Francisco if that's your area, pretty much early 20th and late 19th century. Irish societies are another place, and newspapers that they hold. So you can go out to near the zoo, to the United Irish Cultural Center, to the Dowling Library, which has the Rindex, which has an index to over 2,300 Irish societies, 500,000 Irish names, and they will tell you in what newspaper your ancestor is mentioned and what the article was about, and it may just be his place of birth was mentioned. I have to say a lot of them are just listings of who attended political meetings or other meetings, so you have some sifting to do, but there's always that one grain that has just what you are looking for. And here's examples of obituaries, which the previous speaker also showed you how valuable they can be. And these are all of these obituaries showed the county, which I've highlighted: Tipperary, Dublin, Tyrone, Mayo, Galway. The example on the far right side, though, is a little word of caution, because these two obituaries for the same man who died in Sausalito, one gives his birthplace as County King, and the other as County Kerry. What are you going to do? Two places to look. So everything with a grain of salt and verified somewhere else, but a great starting point will be obituaries. Next, as immigrants became assimilated, they could petition for citizenship, and then after 5 years, they could declare their intention, and then after 5 years, file a petition. These petitions and affidavits are online at Family Search and Ancestry and lots of places. They vary tremendously in what they include by the court system they were filed under. So New York might have an entirely different looking form than Texas, say, or California, but it's very common to be able to find a place of origin on these, particularly later in early 20th century. But some will have them as early as like the 1870s or 80s. Next, another kind of source that you want to check, particularly if your ancestor came later than rather immediately after the famine, is the passenger lists. There are famine immigrant lists, but usually those books, several volumes, will only list a name, an age, an occupation, and Ireland. Big whole column with Ireland and nothing more. But you can see where they were traveling with, and that's going to be important when I talk later on about family. But in these ones in the 1909 to about 1912 included where the last residence was, and you can see the first column that's highlighted tells the county, but sometimes even the townland, and the column on the right tells the relative they are going to live with. So you want to capture all of this information when you find this kind of data online and in these forums, because all of it's going to come together and help you put a picture that you're going to need to know what records to look at when you get to Ireland. Am I going too fast? Okay? Okay, keep going. Here at the library, of course, they've got many, many resources linked to all the categories I've talked about. They have passenger lists. They have after 1865, people could come across land on the railroad to the depot in Oakland and then take the ferry over to the city. So there are lists in books by Rasmussen and that might be just what you're looking for, and you can get a time of arrival and other passengers they were traveling with, and again, building your picture from these different sources. Then, if they were here during the time of a conflict, there may be military records. The Spanish-American War put San Francisco on the map. People came from all over the country. It was a very patriotic time to fight in the Spanish-American War. They arrived by railroad, were housed out at the Presidio, and there are records we have of the rosters of people who were here then, and not just from California, but there were 4 California regiments, I guess. And you can see the bottom 2 give their birthplace and their occupation and the town in Ireland where they were from. So these will all be men in their 20s to 30s on the average. So probably not married or maybe married, but having probably immigrated after the famine. And then just to sum up of all these different kinds of records to look at, you can see they fall, I put them into categories. From 1850 on, all of the listing on the left will have something in it. If they came around the time of a conflict, these are records you'll look at. After the Civil War, cemeteries started to be formal and not just on the property of farmers and outside of towns, but larger cemeteries. So that's when you start seeing obituaries happen too in the 1870s, 80s, and on. Personal ads, the Missing Friends collection out of Boston was where people could say, looking for James Sullivan, have him contact his sister Mary Healy. Those are online. And then in the late 1800s, and as I've said, the passenger lists become more specific, the naturalization lists, and then there are passports when people went back to Ireland, and their picture might be there and lots of information about who they were visiting and where they had come from and so forth. So that's a handout in the packet as well. Did I say, yeah, that's number 3. So 1 was the list of articles you can read that reiterate what I'm telling you. 2 was the diagram with the car going through the different sources. 3, another way of organizing your searching. So that's the first step of our journey. We hopefully, if we go through all of this, like by next weekend, right? No. You'll have come up with, gleaned a number of facts, a number of relationships, and a number of clues and hints to go forward to the next step, which is making mapping your life events and birthplaces to the Irish records. So maybe you weren't too successful in getting a lot of dates. You can extrapolate and create a timeline for your ancestor using what we know about Irish culture in the 18th, 19th century. As you'll see up here, we're going to say a generous lifespan would be 60 to 70 years. Fatherhood was later, 25 or after. Leaseholders were usually older than that. They waited till the father died before they could inherit the lease, and maybe 40 or 50 before that happened. And women listed as leaseholders were widows that inherited that land piece from their husband. The oldest son was almost always the one who inherited, so the younger sons were probably the ones who immigrated. And so you can kind of get a sense, if you've been able to find other relatives, and the position of your ancestor in the sibling order, that there might be an older sibling who stayed behind and had the lease. And the births, mothers gave birth from ages as young as 16 through 42, 45. It's really a long lifespan. You have to kind of be very generous in looking at periods when you would think, well, she couldn't have had a baby then. She might have. They're very long. And the baptisms took place right away, within 2 weeks. And after 1865, when those births had to be registered, there was a fine if you didn't get it in on time. So another thing you're going to see is that the birth date in the civil records might be not the same as the baptism date because they didn't want to have a fine. So if the baby was born August 2nd, they didn't get around to registering it till October, you might find an October birth and a earlier baptism date. So don't be afraid about date discrepancies at first. These can be explained and looked at when you're analyzing your records. And then marriages often took place after the husband got the lease, and so he would be older and she would be a younger woman. So that these are all things you can kind of figure in when you come up with something like this. So let's say you had a grandfather that died in 1925 and he was 47. You can put the span of his life there, and then from that extrapolate and do one for his father and go back to his father and go back 4 generations to have just the broadest idea of when these people lived and may have been on the land. So then the fun part happens. You're going to look at the Irish records. So here we have what's available online now, and also you can find, you can see in Irish repositories. The Irish civil registers, as I mentioned, didn't begin until the latter half of the 1800s. So the first records of marriage, birth, and deaths are going to be 1865 and later. They've all been transcribed, and they are, they've been transcribed and indexed and are on several sites that you can look at. I like irishgenealogy.ie, and these lists of these places are in your handout. And then you've got the National Library of Ireland Catholic Parish Registers. The Church of the Latter-day Saints went to Ireland and microfilmed as many of the parish registers as they could find, and then the National Library of Ireland had those microfilms, and then in 2016 they put them online, and then Ancestry and Find My Past indexed and transcribed them and put them into their collections, and they remain free on those sites. You don't have to have an Ancestry subscription to see the Roman Catholic parish registers. Also, Find My Past has them for free. You don't have to write all this down because it's in a handout, but just to cover that. So those, and then the other remaining major records that are available are the tithe allotment, which took place 1823 to 1837, and Griffiths valuation. Both of these were records of people who were leasing land. And the reason they're so important to genealogists in Ireland is that you can see those little dots that represent census don't go back any farther than 1901. The census records were destroyed or were pulped for paper during the war, and there's only fragments of anything before 1901. And you know, if in doing U.S. research how important census records are, well, we don't have that in Ireland. We have instead these records of who was on the property and who was living next door and where that property was and what it was worth. So here we have the major record sets that are available to search. And this is in a handout with room at the bottom for the next slide where you're going to map. So you're going to take, here's my ancestor and here are the records. Let's see where they overlap. Our immigrant left for the United States in 1860. We have a good idea he was about 20, so born in 1840, married in the U.S., so he's not going to be in the civil registers. In the U.S. in 1901 and 1911, he's not going to be in the Irish census, and he's in the U.S. census, however, and he died in 1912, so we're going to have information about him there. But that only gives us one place to look. They only give us the Catholic registers. Oh dear, we're stuck. No, if you've been careful and you found the name of relatives, you can go back and you may have a father that you've extrapolated and can find him in the Roman Catholic registers. He may have a marriage record in those Roman Catholic registers, and he may be on the land, and you can find that he was paying taxes or tithes. He also may be in Griffiths. He also may be, and his death record may have finally made it into the civil registers. And then a brother who stayed there and had the land, and you're kind of working back and forth through these record sets, is there. And then the brother inherits a lease and gets married, so we've got him in a couple of places. And the brother is actually on the farm, farming the land when the census happens, and then the brother dies. So here, instead of one source to look at, we've got 11. So that's why you want to get the family members' names, get their age ranges, and then match up to where you can go look. Because it would be sad if you thought you only had one place, and when you actually have more than that. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So then you're going to go to the Irish records, and I've started to mention them already. But first, searching basics. You all know, if you've done genealogy, that you have to remember certain rules. One important for Irish is that they will be transcriptions or indexes, often with a link to the original record. Cardinal rule, always look at the original record. It's going to have more information, and it may have been transcribed in a way that won't match what you're expecting, but when you actually look at the handwriting, you'll say, oh, wait a minute. They read Roger as Robert, and I know that, that's my Roger, it couldn't be anybody else. So very big, important rule, look at the original. Second, name and spelling variations in Irish records are essential. There was no standardized spelling. Names were reported to authorities and written by the priest as phonetic. Whatever they heard, they wrote. So you can have many, many spelling variations. And the use of wildcards, which is substituting an asterisk usually for a letter, will help you find those. And also, the naming convention will help you narrow down your family members, because fathers named their first sons after their father, and you can easily find out about naming conventions online. Then next, you want to allow a broad range of years. As I mentioned, we created a very broad range of lifelines for people. You want to be very generous when you look for a birth date. Add plus or minus 5 at a minimum, and take a careful look at the returns, because it may even be outside of that range. But nobody remembered their birth year. The month, however, tends to be more consistent. Someone born in November may be 4 or 5 years off, but the November month will hold up. So that's a clue. And then you want to look at the same record in different sources. Ancestry transcribers may have picked up something different than Find My Past transcribers, different than Family Search transcribers. So compare and contrast the different sources that you'll be looking at. Oh, our little friends are here to give you some more warnings about their names, so you can read what they're telling you. And this is true, because you'll see a Latin variation, you'll see a nickname, you'll see a name variation, and for last names, the spellings that I've mentioned are there. So Biddy here and her husband are giving you a fair warning to expect variation. So as I've driven that point home enough, yeah? Okay, good. So as I mentioned, these are going to be where you're going to find vital life events in Ireland. You saw on that map of different archives. The Roman Catholic parish registers can be found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 different places. They are all coming from the same source. Those transcriptions and those microfilms made by the Church of Latter-day Saints. However, Roots Ireland actually includes also some registers that are held at the local level. So they may actually have more or different data at Roots Ireland than you'll find at these others. But basically, these other sites, the first 3 or 4 are going to be very similar. And then the Irish civil registers, which I mentioned are only latter part of the century, are held at several places as well. irishgenealogy.ie is the one that is the most, it's free, first of all, and comprehensive. One trick with it, though, is that you must know the registration district, which is not the parish, which is not the townland, which is not the county. And so you can find that by using the index that's at the Family Search version of the civil records. The other, and here's an example comparing a marriage event in a civil record and the same marriage event in a church, actual church register. What immediately jumps out at you is the quality of the church registers are often very poor, very hard to read. The handwriting happens to be pretty good in the civil register. What's sad is that it's missing some key information like the names of the fathers, which you usually will find in a marriage record. But both of these are for Patrick Brown and Elizabeth Keogh, married August 11th in the parish of Sagart and in the county of Dublin. Patrick was the full age, meaning 21, and Elizabeth was 16. I think the fathers' names are not there because they may have been dead at that time. But you'll often see that added in better, more complete records, and it will tell you dead or alive and give you a clue who they are. Yeah, I don't know if anyone can even read the August, Patrick Brown to Elizabeth Keogh, the witnesses, Thomas, I'm going to say Curvin and Mary Keogh. Probably likely her sister stood up with her. That was often very common. Here's a story about Bridget Sullivan, common name. Happily, in exploring her U.S. records, we can find that her maiden name is Early, and in the New York death indexes, it gives her parents' names, Matthew and Anne, Anne Crowley and Matthew Early. And with a little more searching, we were able to get closer to a location. So we could go to the Irish civil registers, and here is Bridget's birth record, 13th of April, 1866, in Anna Bradican, Irish speakers, with Father Matthew Early and Mother Anne Early, formerly Cronog. Now that doesn't match Crowley, but I found a source that said Crowney and Crolog were sometimes used for the same family. And what's interesting is that, as we said, in her New York record, she is born in 2 years earlier or later. And here she's, but still born in the same month. Different day, different year, but same month and 2 days away from the other date. So whoever, when this got reported, and then when her children knew what they reported when she died were two different things, but it's close enough, and the time and the date and the place all seem to correlate. We can also go back in these records, forward in these records, and find Bridget reporting her mother's death, and then her brother, who inherit the lease, Michael, reporting the father's death. With that information and the name of the town, we can go to the Griffiths, and which is the other set of records you want to look at, the land records. And here's Matthew Early in Anna Bradican, on the land, and at a site called Ask About Ireland Griffiths Valuation, where you can see not only the listing of the people in the town, you can get a map and identify the plot of land on the map. There's the little circled in green exactly where his farmland was. And, more interesting, that he's not the only Early on this this townland. Townlands are as small as a mile across. The average size was about half a square mile. No, is that right? I'm sorry, I'm not sure of my facts all of a sudden. Anyway, they're small enough places that you would know everybody else's who was farming that townland. And it's almost always with the same name is going to be a relative. And the other people are likely to be in-laws because, you would marry within your circle of friends and acquaintances. So this can be a helpful thing. You might want to look and see if any of these other names show up in the United States. Maybe they emigrated as well or along with. So the key and the goal here is finding that townland name. It will help you find what registration district to look at. It will help you find what Roman Catholic parish to look at. And anywhere way you can find it is a good way to get a lot of information from the Irish records. Lots of places to help you with that. Online, I would highly recommend a name that's in your handout, John Grenham. If you just Google John, first name, Grenham, he's got a whole site with all the maps of all of the counties, the registration districts, the parishes, the townlands. You can spend days learning about things from him. He'll tell you what records are available at what parishes. He'll show you townlands that are within a Roman Catholic parish as well as townlands within a civil parish. So there's lots of places that'll really help. There are townland atlases. And here at the library, in addition to the new Genealogy Atlas of Ireland, there probably are many other books that you can look at to get a visual of what you're exploring. So then, if you've gone all this way and you're still kind of need some more clues, the secret step number 4, is to go back. Go back down the highway. How painful, but it's worth it. It's worth it. So you can look at the what we call the fan club, families, associates, and neighbors, families, associates, and neighbors. And here's an example from Mary Carolyn, who looked at her great-grandmother's sisters rather than the great-grandmother to find their mother's maiden name so she could look for the marriage record in County Galway parish registers. So use family members and use their records. Also use what you know about where they went. Here's a story about chain migration patterns. We're going to this house in Pittsburgh. Will tell you if you can find who lived there over time. Use reverse directories. You're likely going to find many family members who use this as a stepping stone before they moved on to the next place with their family and friends. So luckily they decided like San Francisco was more like Galway than Pittsburgh was. Another example are books and periodicals that will talk about colonies. In New York, there were definite areas of lower Manhattan that were populated by Irish from the same area in Ireland. In fact, one of the wards was known as the Kerry ward, because everybody who lived within that, I think, 9th or 11th ward was from, nearly everybody could be counted on. So you went to live where your relatives, friends, and associates lived, and if you find that they were in that area, there's probably a good bet that that's also where they were from to help you isolate origins. And then, of course, there are communities based on occupation. The mining community in particular has very clear migration patterns. There was a group of miners from County Cork where on the Beara Peninsula, when the tin mine shut down, had those skills, and an Irishman told them they could have a job with him. And this map, the darker it is on the map, the more Irish were living there. And that corner of Montana is as dark as Boston or San Francisco. So that's where the Irish from County Cork went, and many others as well. But you'll have a good bet finding people there connected to where your families came from. So keep on the road. Don't lose hope. It can take quite a while, as I mentioned, but you're going to pick up lots of clues that your mind will start putting together for you. And I hope you will do that, and I'm going to give you 2 quick stories. How's my time here? Yeah, good. So this is my great-grandfather, Charles Downs. He came to San Francisco to join his brother, who had come first, who had worked for the city gas company, and they were pipe fitters and plumbers. And when Charles died, his obituary only said Ireland. But I knew about his brother, and luckily his brother's obituary said they were from Dublin. And then I ordered Charles's death certificate and found the name of his mother and his father and the date of his birth and death, or approximate. And that gave me enough information to go to the Irish records. And in the Irish genealogy.ie, there are civil records, but also Catholic records. And there for Dublin, it brought up Charles Downs, born November 1843. The year doesn't match, but the month does, with parents Thomas and Honora Riley. I didn't know her first name, but there's a Riley. Good bet it's her. Then I could find their marriage record, and then I could go find the birth record for Edward. So this all, and 10 other children, I'll show you. The family stayed on the land. That older brother is there, widow is there in 1901, and you'll notice if you can read them, the sons are Thomas and Charles. So we've got this repetitive naming pattern that helps sort of put cement in the brick wall too. Happily, I met a cousin online who told me about the cemetery where everybody was buried, and then another cousin got intrigued, and she went and visited and got a guide to take her and sent me these pictures of the tombstone where the woman in 1901 put up a memorial to her father-in-law and her husband and his brothers and the mother-in-law. So we've got all these dates and, staggering. Genealogists love this. We're like dancing in the street. And then I was able to construct this 4 generations of downs based on the cemetery and the church records and the civil records and the census. So, as I said, many pieces will start coming together, and I hope you're as lucky as I felt I was when this little tree got built. So another example, I think there's someone I met outside from County Cork, or ancestors from Cork, and with a common name of McCarthy. And when Kathy asked me to help her find her ancestors, I was like, oh God, Kathy, I don't know. This McCarthy from Cork? Are you kidding? But Eugene is not that common. And she did have her ancestors' maiden name. So we've got 2 names. That's really valuable. We gathered these facts together, we guessed, we put it together, and then we could come up with and put into the irishgenealogy.ie site for Cork, Eugene McCarthy and Mary Hurley, and there was only one record that matched, that had those 2 names on it, that was the right time frame. So here we've got the record, and we see that Timothy McCarthy is a witness, so is Dennis, and the first son that Mary had was named Dennis. So that kind of really comes together. And they did some more exploration and verified other ways, and they looked at the original, remember the rule, and they found that, and it's pretty legible. And Cork, for example, the city of Cork has records that go back quite a ways, earlier than other parts of Ireland. And then we were able to put together a tree of Eugene and Mary and their children and their descendants. We didn't get back farther with Eugene, but there's still hope. But the happy ending is that last March, Kathy and her brother and sister were in City of Cork, went to the church, and went to the street where their parents actually had a dwelling in before they left for Australia. So there is hope, and you can find things out, and it can be challenging, but I hope I've given you some tips and ideas of how to get started. So our friends here, the LaFish ladies, have a few final points to sum up for me. Look at the U.S. records first. The Fish gets in the act. He says, match the places and dates to the records. Use a broad range of years and many different spellings, and then explore the records of the family. So that's what I have for today. I hope something was new to you or something was helpful. I hope the handouts also will guide you a little bit when you start your journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Any question for Maureen?
Question and comment. I've heard that a lot of Irish records were actually destroyed purposely by the English. Did you hear what I said?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I heard that a lot of the Irish records had been destroyed by the English.
There was an Irish Civil War in the 1920s, and it was actually the Irish fighting the Irish, and the Four Courts fire burned many of the records that had existed. They're trying to reconstruct those now with a digital project, which is very interesting to look at, but it's true. We lost wills, we lost probates, we lost many records were burned there. What I showed you on that diagram of the records available, that's what's left. There are smaller data sets. There's estate records that show who was working on the land on big estates. There's, at the local level, you can find lots of other small data sets for a particular area that may be helpful. So the big ones though that encompass Ireland, I think it's a little unfair to say the English destroyed them. They did pulp all the census records for the war. I think the Irish had a hand in that too. And they, through various conflicts and everything else. Prior to 1828, there were severe laws against the Catholics. So the
Yes.
priest often carried the parish register in his cassock. There wasn't records that existed centrally anywhere. So that was due to the severe English restrictions on Irish practicing the Catholic faith.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not great what happened, but there's hope.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that angle. Also, the handout, where is that handout?
Richard? Yeah,
So I'll tell you how to get a copy of the handout. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your information. I just started 2 weeks ago researching Jerry's grandmother who came from Ireland to Providence, and I found a lot of good stuff. But of course, like what you just said was like the birth dates are all weird, and it's the same person, but like the month is pretty much the same, but then there's weird stuff. You get to County Tyrone in Northern Ireland, you get Strabane, and then what? And then like we can't find like how do you get? So you go to the Irish registry to find the birth. How do you find the birth certificate from there?
Were the ancestors in Ireland in around 1850s?
They were in Ireland. The ancestors were in Ireland. Yeah,
Okay,
they came here in the 1890s, but they were born in 1877.
Oh, born in 1877.
Yeah, they're born 1877.
Okay.
Strabane, County Tyrone. So like,
Okay.
and how do you find and how do you get
You're
a
going to need
birth
you're
certificate?
going to need to know the civil registration district to see that birth certificate. You go to the FamilySearch.org index to civil records, not the list, not the civil records themselves. That's very incomplete. Index. Put in their name, their year of birth, and the county, and it should tell you the registration district. So this is a two-step process. Once you've got the registration district, go to irishgenealogy.ie, where all those civil records are, then search by the name and the date and the civil registration district. It may be Strabane. They often are the same as the the parish, but it may be something entirely different. So that's why you have to go find that registration district in the index at Family Search.
a couple of the documents I found all said Strabane, County Tyrone, and so that matched. That all matched. And then
Yeah.
his grandmother, Fermanagh, we don't know anything about anything else. We only found one document with the Fermanagh, and that's Northern Ireland as well. So I don't know if like there's we have to search for her too. So anyways,
Yeah.
it's only been 2 weeks. So
The other thing to try, and it just may be worth it, is that the John Grenham I mentioned earlier has something called a wizard. If you look at the ribbon across the top of his site and go to the wizard, you put in what you know, and he'll tell you what records are available and where to look. So that might be a good trick to try. It may work, may not, but it's worth a shot. Yeah.
Maureen, I have a question here.
Thank you, Maureen. So you mentioned the Irish repetitive family naming
Yeah.
pattern. So if I have a John Donnelly, how do I know, what are your tips for, am I looking at John Donnelly or his father or his grandfather or his son?
Okay. If you Google Irish naming convention, it'll come right up. It's also described on the Irish Genealogy Toolkit, a link I've given you. And there was a very clear pattern. First son was named after father's father. Second son was named after the father. Third son was named after the father's elder brother. Fourth son was named after the brother, the father's second brother. And for the women, the same. First daughter was named after the mother's mother. So that's how the pattern. Now, it's only a hint. It's only a clue because babies could have been died and then a second child renamed with the same name. I can go on. And some people just didn't want to follow it, and did whatever they want. But when you find it, when you see a name like Bernard or some of the less common names, you'll see them repeat in the generations, and that's really useful. Like in the case I showed you here, Thomas, 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 Charles, Charles, so forth. But Google Irish Naming Convention or look at one of the help sites, the general advice sites, and you'll explain it to you. The danger of it and the worrisome thing about it is that in the 1830s, there was a huge population explosion prior to the famine. So you'd have families with 10 children, and each one of them would have 10 children. So grandfather Patrick had 10 boys, and all those 10 boys would name their eldest son Patrick. So you've got 12 or 10 Patricks, all born around the same time, all living in the same place. And how do you differentiate them? How do you even begin to sort them out? I will say that John Grenham himself, who I regard as one of the best Irish researchers, said he couldn't sort out his family with all the duplicative names born within the same 5-year time span. He couldn't untangle it. So it's got its pluses in that it helps you identify likely family members, and its minuses that they may have 5 of them to untangle. Yeah. Some people can do it. I mean, get to do it. Yeah.
Maureen, I have a question here.
Hi, thank you for today. Could you spell Grenham's name again? G-R?
Oh, sorry, yes. G-R-E-N-H, like ham, H-A-M. G-R-E-N-H-A-M.
Was
And
that
just
an M
Google that
or-
name, and it'll get to his site. Yes.
Sorry.
John, first name John.
Was that an M for Morris or an N? M or N?
Oh, G-R-E-N is in Nancy,
No.
H-A-M is in Maureen. Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you very
I
much.
really should have put it on the slide, sorry. No, well, you can do a little bit of searching on his site, and then he starts to ask for money. So then you log out and you go back in. I mean, that's not nice. You should pay. I should have said that.
That, thank you so much. That was good advice. I just wanted to know if you were familiar with the U.S. Immigrant Savings Bank, the New York,
Yes.
and the records. If you could
Yes.
speak about that, because I find that is a gold mine.
Yeah, that's a great resource. This is something that is on Ancestry. I haven't found it anywhere else, but Irish came and put their money into the bank, and then there are 3 different files. There's a registry which just tells who opened the account, but then there's another section of it. My mind's not coming up
Test
with it
books.
now.
It's called the
Yes.
test books.
Yes, and that lists the person and who was on the account with them, where they were from, and who their relatives were, and their address, and a bunch of information.
Yeah, like their
So-
what ship they came in on, what year they
Yes.
came. Although sometimes when they opened
Thank you.
another account,
That's
they
an
give different
example, you know,
information.
of some Irish
It's called
specific.
Immigrant with an E, Savings Bank, U.S. Immigrant Savings
Savings
Bank.
Bank.
And it says NY in the front, so it's New York, NY,
NY, and it's a-
U.S. Immigrant with an E, Savings Bank. And you can get it through the Ancestry at the public library. It's a gold mine.
Yeah.
Oh, test book. They have the ledgers, so it shows like how much money they put in when they took it out, and then they have the ledger, the test book to prove it's them.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. It
Oh,
was
you're
very
welcome, and
helpful
thank you for
information.
bringing that up. That's a great example of an Irish-specific resource, like the Missing Friends collection. Yeah,
Maureen, I have a question here.
yeah.
Thank you. Could you discuss, like, looking up ships from Europe or even, Ireland, of course, and ports of entry and, like, ships manifest lists? I might have missed it. I missed the beginning.
There are very few ship records coming from Ireland. They're all arriving in the U.S. The big ports were New York, Boston, Pennsylvania, Canada, and then Louisiana. So if your ancestor settled in the middle of the country, they may have come into New Orleans as a port. Is that your question?
Well, I mean, 'cause I've done the domestic kind of side, but I'm trying to go farther back.
I'm sorry, I don't hear.
I've done some of the domestic research, but I want to find out when people came from, in my family, like Scotch-Irish, and like what ships and names and ports of entry, that kind of stuff.
I look at, on Ancestry, there's a big collection, also on Family Search, of ships' passenger lists. And there are smaller collections that if you Google ships' passenger lists will bring up, other little subsets. There's one, I'm forgetting the one that's out of Boston, that's been pretty good. I don't know, but anyway, I think Google's your friend in terms of ships' passenger lists. You'll get a wealth of sites to go to. Yeah. Are we running out of time? No?
Okay, thank you so much, Maureen. Let's put our hands together for Maureen.